Carol, you first discovered Audrey when you won the Wellcome Trust Screenwriting Prize. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, can you talk about how did Wellcome Trust open up their archive to you, and how did the material even get there in the first place, and what was it?
So
What struck you?
I got the Wellcome Screenwriting Fellowship, which was very open. And Wellcome are one of the biggest global scientific and health charities in the world. And when I went there, I could do anything. So at first I was looking all over the place. And somebody there, Gillian Scudden, who worked there, said, we have the collection of a woman who collected the wrappers of everything she ate every day. And at that point, I went, I need to know who this person is. And the archivist told me. And at that point, Audrey left about 80, there was about 80 huge boxes, over 86, in fact. And they were all in deep storage in Cheshire, because at that point, it was a fairly recent acquisition and hadn't been catalogued. And so I was given a couple of hours in a room with a couple of boxes at first. And I just instantly knew that I was hooked on Audrey because of her humour, her account of her life, the way she saw things. I was just completely addicted. And that was when it began, really. But at a certain point, I said, I can't carry on without meeting the family. So I met Kate Tunnicliffe and Steve Weatherall, the nephew and niece. And in fact, there is a person here tonight that's very important, Anne Curzon. Anne Curzon. So I keep, every Q&A I do, I mention the person at the school gates. So Audrey's collection might not be at the Wellcome and might not exist, but Kate, the niece, was at the school gates and said to a fellow parent, we've got such a huge amount that we've inherited of our aunts, paintings and scrapbooks, and we're going to have to throw it away. And this person said, wait, I'm going to talk to a colleague at Wellcome, because they worked at Wellcome. And that's Anne Curzon, who is actually here tonight. Thank you.
How are you?
And then the archivist from Wellcome, people from Wellcome, surveyed Audrey's work in the flat and took it on. And we also do have Audrey's niece here, Kate Weatherall. There we go. And so my life with Audrey began.
Wow. And talk to us about the writing process. How did you find the story?
Well, I wanted to really honour Audrey and her way of being. It is a portrait of her. Other people would make a different portrait. But I think my fascination with her and the way she saw the world informed the screenplay in the end. It was a third attempt at finding a form. There were different ones. But the road movie seemed to... Right, she loved travel. She went to China before Wham and the Queen. She'd like everyone to know in 1986 when they opened up the doors. So she was a great traveller. She was very intrepid. She was very curious. And in her diary, she had this ability, which is brilliant, to mistake people in her daily life for the people from her past. So Audrey gave me not only the title of the film, which was written in her passport, but she also gave me the way of forming the film. So I wanted to... Instead of flashbacks like you'd have in a biopic where you'd go to someone's past, the people she meets along the way, most of them stand in for someone from her past. So really, the more I looked, the more I saw of how I could make a film, not about Audrey, but of Audrey. So I feel it's a film of her, informed by her.
Mm-hmm. She was speaking through you somehow.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she left so much behind, and it felt like she was communicating with people beyond her life.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
With her art as well.
And Monica, congratulations on your incredible. How did this connect to you, and what was it that galvanized your performance, your embodiment of Audrey?
Well, I mean, I'd worked with Carol before, and we were friends. Carol and Cara and I were friends. And Carol sent me the script. I had no idea she was working on it all that time. And so I read it, and it's a funny thing. It isn't. I mean, I connected with the material, and I connected with the script. But it's a funny thing. I think that often it's not really, sometimes you don't necessarily connect with the character. It isn't that I didn't connect with the character, but the character's different to you. And so often it's more interesting if you think, oh, I don't know much about this person, and you're sort of investigating them. And also I think you kind of stretch yourself as a person more and hopefully learn more about people. So I don't know, I kind of just, there are a lot of lines and also the way that it's written, because lots of it's taken directly from the diaries. And I think that the way that people communicate when they're writing, they're sort of in a different register to when they're speaking, when they're contacting or communicating directly with other people. So yeah, some of it was quite technical actually, trying to approach that and sort of make something that's written, and the way that she speaks is quite constructed, and make it sound sort of active really. But I really found it, Carol sent me several digital books, and some were to do with the hospitals and her treatments, and lots of them were her art. And I suppose I wanted to, rather than looking too much at how she was diagnosed, I just wanted to look at the way that she thought, and just to see that how she thought and try to bring that to life really.
Gina, again, what was the greatest challenge in playing someone who you know exists?
It's often an interesting thing as an actor if you're going to portray somebody who's real, because obviously you feel a huge obligation to honour that person. But I think the thing that I felt more strongly, and perhaps was the thing that attracted me to this enormously, I've always wanted to work with Carol, so I was thrilled that this came my way. But the thing that really resonated with me, which I think Carol did, I think we talked about this, is that she, Audrey had died in
2013.
Okay. So I think when anybody dies, even if you have a strong communication with them, there's always things that are left unsaid, things that you should have said, things that you should have done, things that you wanted to say, etc. And I think particularly in this story, that is very, very acute. And I felt that Carol had done this incredible thing. She had brought some kind of resolution, perhaps, and that I found deeply moving. And it was only, that feeling was only strengthened when I met Dorothy and John. We talked about lots of things, not particularly about Audrey, but just listening to them and witnessing what kind of lives they had and the vitality they had was extraordinary. And it made me feel that thread that you absolutely nailed was crucial.
And Kieran, you have rather a heroic role in the last act.
Very important, yeah.
Very important. Talk us through what the film means to you and what that meant, playing that role.
Well, obviously I wanted to work with Carol, and reading the script was a pleasure. She asked me to do improvise a cab ride of talking for the audition, which is always nice to be asked to do. So we have a small child, so the only way to do it was to get in the car at night and have my wife, shoot it from the side as we drove around London. So it was actually the nicest audition I've done in ages, because it was like a release from the laboratory-like thing you normally do. And there was so much in the script to inform what that tape would be, the sort of tone and what the character was really bringing to the piece. And I'm often playing, a sort of antagonist and something quite dark and sort of pushing drama on in that way. So to turn up and be sort of service, kind, listen, care, be present, not force any time. It was a total pleasure, you know. And Carol didn't know, but we all knew each other. So
Yeah.
I hadn't seen Gina in a while. I played Gina's son once, if you believe that. Kelly and I had worked together, and Alex and I worked
played
together.
Kelly's mum as well.
That's true, yeah. We both called her mum on set. You know, that means there's a lot of history there. You know, I knew Monica too, and
We played sisters.
they're
Wow.
you know, they're having a road movie in the movie, but we were having a road movie as well. And all that heart, Carol's all heart, so that's all in the film. And they're still doing it now. Carol and Cairo are, you know, zipping around the country. So it's a pleasure. It's lovely.
Beautiful. And Cairo, how did you catalyse this material and help shape it into a project to bring it to funders and bring it to this point? How long did it take?
Years, of course. I think the road movie helped a lot because that's a genre or a subgenre. So it was a great way to contain all of Audrey and where Carol wanted to go. But luckily it is Carol Morley, so I do get through the door if I say I have a Carol Morley film. And every independent film struggles. It's very, you know, who knows how we put them together. But tonight, I couldn't be more proud.
Oh.
Cairo is completely heroic, and I feel that I wouldn't have made anything without her. And it's been just brilliant to persist. And you know, obviously we did get BFI money, but we did get turned down the first time. You know, so
It was before my time.
You know, it is about. I feel it's just about going back, and Cairo is absolutely great at going back and having the guts to go back and persist and keep going and do all the elements that need to be done to make something see the light of day. So I'm
Yeah, but look at these collaborators. It's an absolute joy. So, yeah.
And this is a really important creative partnership.
Yeah.
This is your fourth feature together.
yeah, and about 28 short films.
Beautiful. Long may it last. And let's bring in your collaborators. Alex, editor. Talk to us. What was the biggest challenge? I want to ask a question about reality, because we hear a statement of intent from Audrey right at the beginning about reality, and so it signifies something to us, and then we have multiple realities, which I think is really clever. We're obviously outside of Audrey's for a while, but then there's a point at which we're brought in. Can you talk to us about the challenge of that?
Well, as you know, I cut all the way through the shoot, so while the crew is shooting, I'm cutting it the next day. And it was a joy to cut, obviously, it was beautiful, brilliant performances. But what was interesting and quite a challenge was how to bring the art into the film and how to incorporate the art without being plonky for another, you know. So we were thrilled in post when Carol and I got together, and we tried, the first art we tried was when when Audrey first gets into the car and is driving through London, and we see a bit of a bus and a bit of Harrods and that kind of thing. And it seemed to go rather nicely in, and so we suddenly realised we could do it throughout, and we can bring the art throughout the film and get inside her head, get inside Audrey's head by looking at the art, but hopefully not in a very didactic way or an obvious way. And I'm most pleased with that, because I felt that was, you know, a lovely challenge. You know, I was pleased with it.
Beautiful. And what brief, Carol, did you give Carly in terms of score?
Well, I also want to say the editor is your first audience, and Alex can be very hard. And, you know, and we would have fights and arguments. It was brilliant. It was like, that scene has to go. But we've, maybe you could talk about Carly to start with, Alex, because you brought her name first, didn't you?
Well, I've always loved Carly's work, and, you know, think it's thrilling, and so I thought she would be really great for this film. And I did use some of her work in The Temp, which was lovely to be able to use it. But I think what Carly did was just bring this multitude of voices through her idea of using voices in the score. And I just think it lifted the film to a different place, which I thought was wonderful. And again, it all enhances Audrey and her character, which is all it's about. So, over to you.
What's the question?
I don't know.
Well, it was actually the brief that you gave.
I feel
tone?
that we were quite open really, but there was the idea of the voices, and Carly was quite busy beforehand because she's lots of things, including a bad seed with McKee. So her availability, I would normally love if when I work with Carly again, it would be getting her on as early as possible. But it came a bit later than we hoped. But she just really, it was a very open brief, but using piano, possibly voices. And then me and Alex were just absolutely delighted when every day something would arrive. And Carly was very open, but she experimented with a lot of instruments and ways of doing it, which was the brief, to be open and to feel the film, really.
Yeah, I think we had like a lot of early discussions, and then looking at Audrey's work, there's a lot of clues there as well. And there's a lot of like long, continuous, colorful, very playful lines. And I sort of was looking at instruments without holes, keys, and frets, trying to create a little quirky, small, but mighty and beautiful ensemble. So I worked with the voice, the shards, led by Kieran Brunt. And then so a lot of prepared piano. You'll hear like little pieces of paper jammed into the strings, and even a one-holed flute, a horn, and even a pop can is in there. Yeah, so it was really fun. You just had to find a balance, because obviously going from a battle scene, you know, to the more playful moments, and then being warm and sympathetic with Audrey as well. Just need to be able to shift with that ensemble.
And sometimes you moved from very sad music to very humorous music.
Yeah,
in a blink, and it really works, I think. Really.
Yeah, that was the like challenges to find that balance and the tone and everything. But everyone's so brilliant, so it was just an absolute joy.
At the recording of the score, Carly brought in bags of quavers.
Yeah, quavers for all musicians.
For me, it was always about being very close to Audrey's diaries and her attitude really to everything and the way she saw things. But I did go and meet people in the psychiatric world in all areas and talk to them. But it was always, for me, the priority to honour the way Audrey saw everything. But Audrey did talk about her psychiatric nurses who came every 2 weeks. And it seemed with that conversation that she had begun in her diaries and sort of developed, and within she would protest against certain areas of psychiatry. So it felt in a way correct to pursue that, and that's sort of how the character of Sandra came about. So for me, it was the conversation about the world of psychiatry without damning anybody within it, because I didn't want to judge anyone within it. But it did feel like it was a responsibility. But I think once a family came on board, which was quite early, and supported me, and Dorothy particularly, and Kate and Stephen, it just sort of enabled me to pay tribute to a life lived, mental illness being part of it, but the artist and everything else. And I really believe that Audrey had left so much behind, and the way she'd left it behind was to communicate to others. And that's where I sort of put my emphasis, I think.
Just, I suppose that Audrey, you can see in the film that she really battles against the idea of her own diagnosis, and I suppose I didn't really want to see it. I felt that if I looked too much at all of that, you can end up playing the clinicians rather than the character, and there was so much rich material. I think at the beginning, the Wellcome Trust had her archived under patient art, and I suppose I really wanted to bring out that she was an artist, and artists just see things differently.
Wonderful.
So some of it is from the diaries, but I did start to speak like Audrey. Like I would meet the family and say something's afoot, and they're like, "You're speaking like Audrey." So that sort of language. So I began to be able to converse in a way that she would, and with Sandra, and as Monica quite rightly says. Well, she didn't say it, but I'll say it. But she's a genius, so she can make anything brilliant. But I do feel that it was, for me, it was so wonderful to look at a first-person account of a life and to create a character that was very able to be emotionally on different levels in quick spaces of time. But you needed really brilliant people to be able to do that. Yeah.
I do just want to say, though, that when you go to drama school, when you hopefully get into drama school, the thing that they're really, really looking for is if you can make a transition, if you can make a gear change, if you can change your thought. And in terms of making transitions, Audrey's an absolute gift. I mean, if it's really wonderful to play somebody who changes thought quickly and changes thought to something completely different. It's just you're just in such a gymnastic space with all of that, and it's really, really fun.
It's brilliant because Welcome, who are based in London on Euston Road, but they have catalogued, preserved, conserved all of the art, all of the scrapbooks. Each scrapbook now has a box that was specially made for each scrapbook. It's an amazing collection, and you can book to go in. There's a lot online. Eleanor Carter, who is one of the archivists that was part of it, all very important part of it. She's written about the archive, but it's all available. And I really do think obviously Welcome, it's a big organisation. It takes them a while to say get a show together, but I think that will be happening. So her work is saved, but it's also in really good condition now.
Well, she moved from being in the patient art into art.
The patient art was dropped, yeah, because I think the terminology shifts so much. Yeah.
Gina.
Yesterday, I looked at a couple of YouTube films about 7 minutes long, which are the Welcome Foundation archivists showing you what they're doing with her collection. Very beautiful and very moving, actually. There's talking about how you preserve something like this. For example, with Audrey using sellotape quite often, that's a bit of a nightmare for preservation, as obviously that noise, you know it. So it's really beautiful how this woman talks about, for example, when she came across a fly in amongst all of the books and the decisions she made on how to preserve this, and just watching them very beautifully and gently and caring and so reverential, holding and folding and preserving, it was exceptionally moving.
I remember, so Agnes I worked with on The Falling, and the way we began on this film is she phoned up and went, "You've got to come to Paris to see this film." And I went, I got the Eurostar for the day and saw Drive My Car, forgetting it wouldn't be subtitled in English. So I saw the 3.5-hour Drive My Car with French subtitles. I don't know any French. And for the first half hour, I was panicking. And then I really got into it. And then from that, we talked a lot, me and Agnes, about how to shoot in a car, because like the limitations of a car and honouring that space. And we spent about 2 weeks with Janie Levick, the production designer, on the colour yellow. We literally drove people, like, they were just like, "Oh, can you stop talking about yellow?" But with Agnes, I feel there's something so magical about the relationship to what she does, which is that you don't talk too much about it. So our brief really together, our way of looking at it was like an Audrey scrapbook, and that we used her colours. We used her colours, so we kept going back to look at the colours that she used. And what I love about working with Agnès as well is we don't move the camera unless you absolutely have to. So there's no follow camera. And I didn't want to do point of view camera, so we were looking at ways of building the world of Audrey, but without saying this is exactly the way she saw it. So it slips in and out of that. So we'd have a lot of conversations about position of camera. But with the car, we actually did loads of pictures of positions in cars. And there are just lots and lots of pictures of that. But it's such a privilege to work with Agnès. She's in her 70s. She can lift a camera. She has more energy than I have ever had in my entire life. But it's not overshooting. It's very methodical. And that methodology, I've learned so much from her. So I feel like her apprentice in some ways around the image and what you can do with the image, but how restraint is so important. And the thing about Agnès as well that is personally brilliant to me is she falls in love like I do with the actors. We fall in love with them. It is a love affair with faces and movement. And she is so able to know exactly where the camera should be. So it's about trust as well in that process with her. I could go on for about 2 hours, but we haven't got to. Well, we shot it in 26 days under COVID conditions, so it was tight. And then filming in a car takes a long time and loading it up, and there would be things I would love to do extra angles on as well sometimes, but the restrictions are good in a way. For Monica, it was a 14-hour days, I think.
Yeah, it was 14-hour days. Yeah.
But really, it was.
I had one little scene off where Dorothy ties her shoes. I don't know if you remember that bit where she ties her shoes. I think I've got an extra few minutes in bed. It's my favourite scene.
But it was, for me, I think for me, it's always about the actors, the characterization, and Alex is an amazing editor and will cut for performance. And so therefore, a shot might look better sometimes, but we always go for performance. And Alex has taught me that. And because your actors are the relationship with the audience and they're telling the story. So the restrictions were I'd love, I'd watch films before we shot by Kubrick and I go, oh, wow. And then I found out he had a year to film it. You're like, we've got 26 days, but we don't let that dampen our ambition. But one day I would love more time. That would be amazing.
Cairo, anything to add?
Well, I can't, and yes, it's going through my head because, of course, we were up north as well, so it went camera dark at 4 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
So very few days, short days, so it was full on for everybody to bring it. But there was so much goodwill and so much love of Audrey and her work and wanting to make it happen. So it did.
Well, I feel that Audrey did want her art to be seen, and she was definitely communicating that in her diaries. And her mum, Belle, at one point went to Cork Street to take Audrey's work when Audrey was in her 50s and Belle was in her 70s. And she took Audrey's work and found, it was very intimidating, Cork Street in London, the art galleries. And they told her that Audrey needed more training, which she reported back to Audrey, who was up in arms because she'd had so much training. And I think that for me, getting to know Audrey through her diaries and then looking at the first hospital she was in, which was Warlingham Park Hospital near Croydon in the 1950s, I think that early treatment for psychosis or around mental illness is so crucial. And when she went in, she was put on Largactil and was basically put to sleep for a large period of time. And I think now attitudes to mental health, extreme mental health difficulties are different, but back then it probably had a major impact on her not achieving her potential, not the illness itself, but the treatment of the illness. She never returned to the Royal Academy. When I went into the Royal Academy archives, there was a letter from the head of school there, the head curator, to the psychiatrist, and they gave a letter to Audrey that he could give her if he chose to. I don't know whether Audrey ever saw that letter. It said, come back. But the other letter was to the psychiatrist saying, I sometimes wonder if Audrey's lack of looks have contributed to her mental state. She has a good use of colour. She's a good artist. I do not want to give the impression she is great, written to the psychiatrist. So there's lots of attitudes from the 50s towards women and artists. And all the artists I looked at, the student artists, contemporaries of Audrey's, that were men, went on to have careers either as leading art school teachers or running leading art schools, or became leading very well paid artists, and none of the women did. And as we all know, women artists have not even been exhibited in major galleries around the world. And so I feel that Audrey's life as an artist was compromised by many, many things. So we can never know.
But, Carol, just to wrap on that, the film allows you not to wait for permission. None of us have to wait for permission anymore to embrace her and the platform that this gives her.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beautiful thing is Audrey Amiss is getting known, her art's getting known, people want to see it. People that have seen the film have come up to me, and there was one woman, she went, I'm 76 years old, I've never cried in a film before, I cried when she screamed, I've spent the last 50 years in and out of psychiatric hospital. And there's been lots of people with experiences that don't feel they've seen of themselves on screen, the same with artists. So I feel it speaks to the artist in all of us, and the mental health is such a big thing, but extreme mental health is deeply, difficult to begin to understand. So I hope that the film is for them, everybody, to become connected to each other and closer to those stories.
In terms of morality as well, of looking at mental health through art and through drama, the important thing is that you don't do it badly, that you do it responsibly. And I think it's probably worse not to look at everything, isn't it? Not to look at all aspects of human nature that you can.
That's an amazing place to end. So thank you for this beautiful film.
The film is on release now, and
modern films.
But you could also go to your London cinemas or any cinema and demand the film to be shown.
Yes.
Please go to
Demand.
your cousins,
On demand.
your everymans, your London cinemas, and get it shown in London, because it's being shown all around the country, but we've not got it shown in London very much. So we want you to open the doors of London cinemas now.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol, Monica, Gina, Kieran, Cairo, Alex, and Carly.